I'm so thrilled to be chatting with you because I saw your film at the SCAD Savannah Film Festival and I was just blown away by it. And it was one in my top 10 last year. It was just an amazing film and I was so moved by it. And I want to thank you for sharing that part of your life and sharing it because I think it's a really important film. So,
Thank
yeah.
you so much. Yeah. I sharing it was not my original intention, but
Right.
it just was so, it was just the most incredible learning experience on so many levels that it felt wrong not to share it in a way. And it was very beautiful vision of what death and dying can look like. If the right circumstances are there, like medical aid in dying, for example, like if you have the right to bodily autonomy at the end of life and you can gather your family around you and, celebrate, it just gave him an opportunity, I think, to feel a sense of agency and for all of us to be able to plan a very healing closure. And also just kind of improvise. And then obviously having Rachel, the rabbi, in the family didn't hurt. So I guess just sort of, it was in a way, just such an incredibly transformative time that ultimately I felt like we had to share it so that we could, other people could benefit from it. So,
I recognize so much of like just there's so much we become part of the family, I feel like
yeah.
as the audience. You like it feels like there are elements of my family I see. So um but I wanted to ask you, since the doc came out, what has the reception been like from family members and friends and from people who've that personally? What did they think
Oh
of it?
my gosh. I mean, I've been blown away. I've made films for 30, going on 31 years. And I have never come close to making something that impacts people like this. From the moment it premiered at Sundance and it was virtual because of Omicron, the only upside of that was that people in New York could write us too. They could watch it, everywhere people could watch it. And I think my family and we stayed up for like 4 till 4 in the morning reading messages that were coming in and emails that were coming in from just everyone and people that I had no idea who they were. My sister I'd read one, then she'd read one, and I'd read one, and my mom would read one, and my brother would read one. And it was just like, it was gratitude. It was just gratitude to us for sharing. And I know that, for my sister, it was a really big leap to share this because at that point in history, Reform Judaism didn't support the right to die with dignity in that way. And they've since revised that. But, it's a big thing for her to be pictured helping dad.
Yeah.
And so I was very nervous about like, what was I bringing upon my family? But it was very clear to all of us that this was an incredibly healing, almost like a balm, like it was almost like dad in film form or some kind of white light that was helping people. I've had friends say, I saw a friend last night who hadn't talked to his mother in months and left the screening in tears and called his mother. I had a friend who hadn't talked to his father in 10 years and they reunited. I've had friends go and do vidouis with their parents right off the bat, which is, the deathbed confessional. As my sister says in the movie, you don't have to wait till the end to to
Right.
to speak openly about the shame you're carrying. And yeah, the film, I've had people stand up and say, I'm shedding my shame from this day forward. Um, it's been truly remarkable. I've never witnessed anything like it as an audience member either. I've never seen anything like it because the audience like cries together, laughs together, and then I go away and I come back for the Q&A, if it's a theatrical screening, and people are just like broken open in the most beautiful way. Really just kind of like in a way that they're happy about.
Yeah.
Um, they say that they've healed from like really bad deaths. That's the most interesting. I asked a trauma therapist about this because people whose parents, maybe had Alzheimer's and could have turned nasty or were nasty all their lives, or
Yeah.
they weren't able to be with their family during COVID and they lost their loved ones, whatever the trauma was, they often, I've got hundreds of people saying to me that they feel better after watching the film. And I'm
Wow.
thinking, and that they feel healed somehow. And I asked this trauma therapist, and she said, it's a type of therapy that we practice called imagination therapy, where you go through the traumatic event, say sexual assault or something, but you imagine it going differently. And in
Oh,
that way, it
wow.
heals. And I think that's what's happening here. Like you said, you transpose your family, you're invited into our family, you have a seat right there for the whole, period of time that we're together. And you kind of get to know us really intimately, but you also get to you get to relate to different characters and see your own family. So it's just like a miracle film that I only really discovered with this film. Another aspect of it, that another great aspect of it. It was also
Yeah.
like amazing because the film really saved me. It
Wow.
helped me to make the film, just to shoot the film, even though I didn't know I was making a film per se. I
Yeah.
shot like a film because I'm a filmmaker, and I was like, well, I'm going to give Dad the best. But I wanted to just record every word before he was gone. But as soon as I set up cameras, I thought I would be maybe distracted by it, or that it was mediating the experience, but it was the opposite. It was like this safety blanket where I didn't have to worry about forgetting any of it. And
Wow.
when Dad had that stroke when I was 10, I can't remember him able-bodied from before that.
Right.
I was just,
Yeah.
I was just like panicked about forgetting anything he said, or even his personality in any way, which you could see was a really special personality.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the aha moment that you had when you realized, like, I know you were putting the memorial video together and that's when you're like, wait a minute, I have a documentary here. What was there, like something like, what was the aha moment, I guess, if there was one?
I mean, I think it was, I knew that I needed to do something to support choice at the end of life. I just as important as abortion is, this is vitally important. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just that there's millions of terminally ill people and they can't fight for this right themselves. And once a family is in this position, it's pretty much the time they start thinking about it, I think, because death and dying is so stigmatized in our society. So we don't prepare for this. So it's a really underserved population. I just didn't realize that until I was in it. And my brother found this law. And I mean, everything you see in the movie wouldn't have happened without that, right?
Yeah.
Dad was totally despondent. He had suddenly agency. He was suddenly able to, have power over his own body, as after 40, in his case, 40 years of being paralyzed and powerless over his own body, and being ousted from his company and all of this. He finally was able to call the shot and say, I'm going to die on March 3rd. That gave us a terrifying deadline. And I wanted to edit the film so it felt like we were walking a plank.
It did feel like that. I mean,
Yeah,
it
it
felt
was
like not they were
scary.
walking a plank, but like felt like we've got this deadline we've got to hit. It was
Yeah, it
like,
was super stressful because, like,
yeah,
when on March 1st, when I realized, like, oh my God, it's because it was February into March, and February is an extra short month. It took me by surprise that it suddenly was March, and that meant
yeah,
I had 2 days with my dad, and so that scene always gets me because I really couldn't hold it together at that point. But he, of course, comforted me as he comforted everyone,
yeah,
right? And said he'd come play tennis with me. But yeah, I think, certainly by the time I called my sister to ask permission to film her, because she came out 5 days before, and I knew I needed to kind of make the cameras and the filmmaking process disappear as much as possible.
yeah,
I didn't want to ambush her. But I have a Zoom recording where I asked her with my family. Like, by then my parents were really invested in the process too. And my brother was really, I kept finding him behind the camera if his kids were visiting with Dad. Everybody kind of, I think, started to feel really comforted that something of Dad would be left after he was gone. But the reason we asked Rachel for permission was to make a short film to support end of life choices. So I think that I knew then I was going to make a short film partway through, but nothing this personal. It was really in the response to the memorial video, which was really a memorial video, but it was like 32 minutes long because I couldn't stop editing that week. because as a grieving daughter, there's my dad alive in the
Right.
totally amazing tooth, with his tooth missing, but he's talking to the flight attendant, and he's talking to the pilot. I was like, oh my God, this is a miracle, And so I just kept cutting, but the response from the people in that Zoom memorial showed me how meaningful this would be for everybody else, how
Yeah.
important this was. And I started to realize, like, there aren't any films like this, there's nothing
No.
really shows people maybe how to die and maybe how to live, and how to love, and like what a family could be like, like it just, there was so much like love in that room. The footage almost has this like really beautiful quality to it, just light. And I mean, the score, that I asked Morgan to make, I said, make it womb like, like hug the audience, because that's
Yeah.
how it felt. If I woke up here at my house, um, all I wanted to do was get to my parents' house so I could just be
Mhm.
in that room. It was like a very sacred space. And I've heard that from a lot of people about, when they lose their loved ones. There's just a pure presence in the room that is really remarkable. And so people, just their thoughts on death had changed from seeing even that memorial video. They were, and understanding of medical aid and dying. Like, they just were so expressive of just like, please more. Will you make
Wow.
this film? And I was having a wonderful time spending time with my dad. And he
Yeah.
was like where he wanted to be now. I didn't have to worry about the pain.
Right.
I could just be with him and comb through the 500 hours I had, and I was so grateful I filmed it. I
Yeah.
wasn't going to film it. I was like, I went to a therapist thinking something was wrong with me, like, or like, I didn't want to mediate my experience or my family's experience. So I was not going to film it. My father, when I asked him, said, I instinctively know you're on the right track, which is really pretty
Had to
amazing.
make you feel really good. Yeah. That
Well, he's always so supportive, right?
yeah.
But that's kind of beyond. Like, I'm like, I don't know what track
Yeah.
I'm on, but he never let that camera turn off, and a few days before his death, I invited a friend of mine who's a DP, to come over, and Turner Drummondville, a gentle spirit, and I thought he would be perfect presence to film the passing of my father. And I knew I couldn't operate a camera that day. And so he came and met mom and dad, and they were very happy to know the man who was going to film dad's death, and they just were all in.
Wow.
Yeah, my sister was like, it wouldn't be what I choose, but if you want this, mom and dad, and they were like, we do. So
Wow.
yeah.
Is there any footage that you wish you would have gotten, or any kind of like questions you wished you would have asked any of him or your family members? Any like, since this wasn't really what you intended it to be in the beginning, but like, is there anything that you wish you would have had in the film that didn't
Well,
make
I
it?
had, the thing about filmmaking that I love, I mean, I love a lot of it, but I've been really a devout, like a devotee of documentary for so many years, because it focuses me. I've kind of become a PhD in whatever the subject is I'm taking on, and it's like a bridge, right? And it allows me to ask questions about anything. And so the fact that I was filming made me so present, and it made me ask all these things while it was happening. And
Wow.
there are a few little things that have come up since where I'm like, wait, and it's usually to do with lineage and stuff, it's stuff that like I wouldn't have necessarily asked. And my brother, it might be in my mountain of footage, because my brother did like sort of interview my dad nightly, trying to get
Wow.
whole family tree down. Because we had that conversation about how it's all going to be gone with him. So we were really focused on that. That was part of the stress of those weeks,
Yeah.
but basically very, very little, because I was filming. So
I was thinking about what like, were you ever worried that you were filming something that might be used against you in some capacity in a legal sense, since with like, I
yeah.
mean, with Roe v. Wade being shut down last year, and so many different ways that the government changes things. Were you ever worried about? Like, what
That's
am
really
I
funny.
filming something that's gonna be in trial or something?
It's really funny you ask because I'm actually me and my family and I are headed to Washington, uh, DC to play the film for members of Congress and to
Wow.
advocate for medical aid in dying and to do a bunch of meetings on Capitol Hill, because we just feel like we need to pay it forward to other families. And so we'll be there in like 2 weeks today.
Wow.
Yeah. And it turns out, this is gonna probably sicken you, but ever since 1997, there's been a ban on federal funding for medical aid in dying. So even if you're in a state like California or Colorado that has medical aid in dying, you actually can't die if you don't have enough money to buy
Oh,
the medicine. So it's just unconstitutional, I think. From the limited knowledge I have, I did study constitutional law as an undergrad. So I think but the problem is the Supreme Court is not necessarily a sleeping dog we want to wake up right now on this topic. But I have found some allies in Congress and from some other films that I've made and people that I've filmed in the past. I've contacted them and they're in Congress and they're very passionate about repealing the ban. So that's one of the reasons we're going there. But we're also touring the states to try to change the law. Before it came out, my hand on the cup, helping my father, you saw that I carefully said to him, I'll
yes.
hold your hand, you know?
Mm,
Um, and I was concerned because the hospice nurse also was like, you should probably edit that part out, like
wow.
she wasn't going to stand in the way because there was a desperate moment where if dad didn't take that medication in 2 minutes, he could have been in a, fugue state forever, and
Right.
that was unthinkable. That stress should not be on a family ever at the end. And thankfully, at least in California, they've changed it since the film. And it's these kinds of things that make me realize like just how powerful a tool this film can be because they've brought it down to one drink and it's flavored now.
Yeah.
Here, that you saw that dad's last words were about how bitter it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was very careful to be like, I'm gonna put my hand on your hand, dad. And then my sister,
Right.
you're not doing this alone, and put her hand on so now both of us are involved. So I ran it by an attorney, and
Wow.
that attorney said, you need to cut that out. Like you
Wow.
be in real trouble. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go down with the ship, I guess, because I'm just not cutting that out. I can't do it. Like once I had that advice, it's almost like when you flip a coin, you're like, no, actually, I want to do the thing. Like I was like, come and get me, and so I just thought it was too important a conversation to have.
Right,
Um,
and you have a whole film of him saying that he wants to die too,
he made
like,
it very clear, and in Canada,
yeah,
it's a lethal injection. In
yeah,
Canada, it's painless. And I've had many people, like I remember a veterinarian walked up to my brother and me after our premiere at Telluride and said, we treat our pets better than we treat people who are dying and our loved ones. And yeah, honestly, it's all the people that have come up. I told you about all the people that were healed by the film. There are so many people that have come up crying about parents or loved ones that were dying that begged them for mercy and they could do nothing because they were in Florida or New York even,
yeah,
it's only legal in 10 states. So it was so many people that it was just needlessly suffering. And, 1/3 of the people who get the medication don't even take it. Just having it
yeah,
is like wind in their sails. Like, okay, I could if I needed to.
yeah,
And so, yeah, it's something that I left in knowing that I could be arrested. And then my sister, who's also just extremely courageous, like my dad, she said, Ondi, could you maybe cut out the part where my hand's on the cup? Because somebody's going to take that, freeze it, and use it to take down my rabbit. And I thought, oh my gosh, the last thing I want to do is hurt my
right, yeah,
career. And that's the last thing my dad would want. And
right,
so I went back to the edit and I looked at every single angle had that. And I thought, oh my God, I can't, there's like, I went back to her and I said, you know what, Rachel, I will cut the scene rather than hurt. you? And she said, she just kind of paused and she's like, you know what, leave it in.
Wow.
So we left it in. Yeah. So that's probably the part was trickiest in terms of legal.
Yeah. Wow.
Now you can help in California. Now you can
Yeah.
actually help your loved one.
Wow.
That's changed also. So, so
Wow.
that proves that, the power of film to be able to move
Yeah.
the needle for real things, real,
Yeah. I
not
just,
just how people feel, but, politics, I guess,
yeah.
law.
I just have one last question for you. This has been such an amazing conversation. And I want to say it was such a privilege to watch your film. Like it really was. And to be with your dad in his final moments, like it was, oh gosh, I just get emotional thinking about it again. But I want to know how this film will affect your future in film, like your future filmmaking, and like how do you imagine that, I mean, something
What a
like this
great
has to
question.
impact what you do after this, I would imagine.
Yeah, it definitely does. So, okay. So first off, the papers on the bed that in the movie, I don't know if you remember that. That's actually a screenplay I've written about Air Florida and the stroke and its impact on our family. And there was actually a crash where Air Florida crashed into the Potomac River. You might remember that.
Yeah.
90. So all of that has been a screenplay I've been developing with my father for nearly a decade. And I was going to
Wow.
read it to him one last time. And I was happy. In fact, I was in such denial about the documentary that I was so happy it was being recorded on camera so that I could note his expressions as I was reading it to him. So every day we did like 5-10 pages.
Aw.
So that was one of the activities we did when he was dying. So that's one thing I definitely I've always dreamt to make that film. It's been my dream film. But what I did was I went back, and the journey that my family and I took with this is I've sort of framed the whole thing with that, because it's such a powerful lens through which to look at the achievements that, like he did extraordinary things. Like he democratized the skies, basically put deregulation through Congress. And I just thought, you know what, us facing sort of his stroke and then it being mirrored and us coming back together as a team at the end of his life is really beautifully narratively. So I put it into the script. So that I hope to make. That's also called Last Flight Home. And then I'm making a film called The In Between, which is about the only hospice for the homeless in America, where they also get recuperative care, where they can heal from operations. If they leave the facility, they either leave because they passed away, not alone, no one dies alone there, and cared for with such compassion, or they leave to go into housing and they've recovered. Um,
Wow.
it's an absolutely beautiful place, and it's a way to look at homelessness from such an elevated, compassionate position. When I walked in there, and it's definitely influenced by my journey with Last Flight Home. That's why it's an answer to your question, because the in between, it's called the in between. It's like INN, like the in between, and I just thought that's the space I'm really interested in exploring now, is that space between life and death,
Wow.
where the veil lifts and we can sort of see to the other side, and I mean, I've talked to so many hospice workers now that have these experiences of people seeing their loved ones at the end and reaching for them and then dying, and
Oh,
my father went from thinking there was nothing to totally confident because he was seeing his family at the end. So it was really interesting. I just kind of want to stay in that space where there's so much love and what's most important in life rises to the surface, and to do it in this environment that is almost like the happiest place on earth, like this really cozy in between facility. Doesn't feel like a facility, it feels like a community. It's very fulfilling work. So yeah, so that's what I'm cutting right now, and that's what I'm in
wow.
production on. And then I have a couple other projects, but that are important to me. One's about my sister, which is why, like, if you're wondering how I have that footage of my sister from New York, it's because from protesting and all that, it's because I've been making a film about her for years, even though she doesn't like cameras. But now, because of Last Flight Home, she trusts me more. A
Wow.
little more like she's nicer about it. Thanks, Dad. But yeah, so that's really a great film too. So yeah, I've always made films that I feel like will matter, hopefully, to people, and that will make the world, you know, improve even just an iota, just make
Yeah.
us question things and question what we think is immutable and really try to, yeah, take action in our lives. But yeah, nothing like this. And so I think
Yeah.
it's hard to put into words, but definitely happy with the projects I'm working on now and taking a little more time just for my, you know, for my loved ones. And not that you saw I was a dedicated daughter, but I work a lot. So I'm trying
Yeah.
to balance things out a little more and take a little page from my own lesson book here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this has been such a great conversation. And like I said, I just really loved your film. So, yeah, thank you for it.
Oh, I
And thank
appreciate
you
it. Thank
and thank you
you.
for this chat too. Thank you for the interview.
Again. Great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. I can't wait to see
Yeah.
your next, whatever all those things you're working on. I can't wait to
All
see it.
those things.
All those things, all those things.
Great. Well, definitely send this to me when you
Sure.
when you're done with it, and I'll post it and we'll be in touch
Okay, that sounds great.
in the future. Okay.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Wonderful.
Okay. Good luck
Have a
with everything.
wonderful night.
You too. Take
Thanks.
care.
Bye.
Bye.